people online to listen in or speak or whatever we do with that.
Meeting to order right now. Start off with the roll call. Diane Bailey.
Present.
Stephen Booker. Joseph Chen.
Here.
Michael Clausen.
Present.
Kathleen Goforth.
Present.
Nele Hipuli. Aurelio Huizar. Gail Lee. Here. John McKenna.
Here.
Jason Mendelson.
Present.
Damanpreet Sarai. Here. Here. Robert Whitehair.
Here.
Thank you.
Thank you, and please note, I don't know if Mailey's on there yet, but we have people participating under the emergency provision, full ability to vote under that provision on Zoom as well. Okay, so the first thing.
I'm sorry, Jason. How are you?
I'm great, how are you?
Long time no see. I wish I was there. I almost feel like I could jump in the car and get there pretty quick, but so is it just cause? I need the folks who are appearing remotely. If it's just cause, they just need to very, very generally describe which of the just cause provisions they're relying on, and it's caregiving for a family member. It's a contagious illness. It's a need due to a physical or mental disability, or a fourth thing that probably doesn't apply here. I'm assuming we're talking just cause. I could also describe.
Sorry. I can speak to, can I speak to you? Want them to speak to it directly?
I can.
Either way is fine.
I can speak to. I'm participating remotely because I'm caring for somebody with a contagious disease.
Sorry.
Yeah. Okay. And then who's the other person?
They're not here yet, right?
Yeah, we're also expecting someone due to a
Caregiving.
yeah, caregiving.
And the other person is a consultant and not a member of the committee.
Oh, no, we have a member of the committee too for that. You guys are cool.
Yeah,
You don't
I
need
was
to
just, he was asking who the other person on was. Oh, you do have one more person.
And I don't want to belabor it, but just so Kathleen, just so you know, you can only use the just cause twice in a calendar year. So just please keep that in mind.
Got it. Thanks.
That's really interesting.
Thank you. Okay, is there any public comment for items not on the agenda? And if so, please, all right, go ahead. You want to use the microphone?
Good evening, Brian Schmidt from Menlo Park. I just wanted to mention that we last month completed the first complete retrofit and electrification of multifamily housing in San Mateo County, the Willow Court Housing Project, which is also 100% affordable housing. So the first time that happened was not some rich, expensive condominium. It was for 100% affordable housing in the underserved community of Bellhaven. We're working right now on a case study that we will make available to anyone who wants when it's complete. I would note that Silicon Valley Clean Energy is I believe in the process of working on similar projects. At some point, Peninsula Clean Energy might choose to put some program funds in that direction. So I think the experiences that we've had and maybe that SVCE has will be useful for future efforts in that area. Just want to let you all know.
Awesome, thank you. Are there any other public comments for items not on the agenda? Anybody online?
Any raise hand?
All right, I'm gonna close the public comment for that. There's more public comment on agenda items later, if anyone wants to make it. So the next thing for us to do is to approve the minutes for the September 12th, 2024 regular meeting and approve the consent agenda. Please take a moment to review that. And then I would entertain a motion to, oh, I'm sorry, please,
I have a minor correction.
please.
We actually didn't do the burnout training at our last meeting. We ran out of time. We had a great discussion. It caused us to bump it. And so I wonder if that could be just crossed out of it.
Oh, it is on the
I
agenda.
think it's
Was canceled or that we
Did I
postponed
miss
I
that?
don't think so.
on Thursday?
Oh, it does, okay,
Okay,
we're good.
so it's there, but it says it was canceled.
The Brown Act committee was postponed to a future meeting.
Okay,
And we'll speak on
it's
the next-
postponed till this meeting and I didn't see it on the agenda.
It was, and in 2 seconds, you'll find out what's happening. Appreciate that. It'll be on next month's meeting unless it gets bumped again, but there'll be a. David, who doesn't know this yet, will be doing one very shortly here in the 2-second version.
I appreciate your concern for the Brown Act. This is so.
Thank you for reading the minutes.
Thank you. Any other comments on the minutes? Corrections? Can I get a motion to approve the minutes and approve the consent agenda?
I so move.
I second.
Thank you, Sharon.
Well, I think the motion is to, approve the agenda and the consent agenda. And the minutes are part of the consent agenda, so, I think if that's, with the chair's permission, I think, can the motion be to approve the agenda and the consent agenda item?
Michael, can you approve or make a motion to do that, approve the agenda and the consent agenda?
I'm moving to have whatever David just said.
Thank you. Cheryl?
I second.
All right, thank you. Is that transitively connective enough for you, David?
I promise I will not continue to be disruptive.
No, you will be, because I need you to be in about 1 minute, so give me a minute. All right, can we do a roll call now?
Diane Bailey,
Yes.
Stephen Booker, Joseph Chen.
Aye.
Aye.
Kathleen Goforth,
Aye.
Melee Himuli, Aurelio Huizar, Gail Lee,
Aye.
John McKenna,
Yes.
Jason Mendelson,
Aye.
Damanpreet Sarai, Cheryl Shah,
Aye.
Remy Tan, Desiree Thayer,
Yes.
Robert Whitehair.
Yes.
Thank you. The motion passes.
Thank you. I'm gonna, the chair report in 2 parts. The first part is mine. And the second part will be David doing a little Brown Act refresher in anticipation of next month's Brown Act. Wonderful training you're all gonna love. My report is that at the board meeting, the board went out of their way to thank us for our expertise and passion and involvement. And pledged to send liaisons to be here to benefit from what we give them, express how invaluable we were in all the things we were doing. And I wanted you guys to know that and hear that, and I commend you to look at the minutes, which are available on YouTube from the meeting, and see how superlative they were speaking of us. I think it will make you feel good and hopefully heard a little bit. And they spent a lot of time appreciating our discussion, along with the other group's discussions on things we presented them last month. And I hope we're continuing that in the future. And if Kathleen, who was there as well, and Vanessa, anything to add to that, I'd love you to do so before I go to David.
Yeah, I would just add that the board had a really thoughtful discussion about the whole nuclear allocation issue, which we had discussed at our meeting. And I think it'd be worthwhile for people to watch the video of their meeting. I was impressed. They had a very, as I said, very thoughtful discussion. I think there were a lot of the same perspectives brought up that were shared at our meeting. And the one issue, I believe in our resolution, we had referenced the letter that Sean had mentioned was being written, and we gave a recommendation for that letter. And my understanding is that the letter is, at least was at the time of the board meeting, kind of on hold because they were trying to coordinate with other CCAs that weren't necessarily on board at the moment. So it wasn't, there was support for our recommendation, but it may not be able to move forward right away. There was something else I wanted to mention and now I'm blanking out, but anyway, that was it. But there were definitely some very, very complimentary comments about how much they appreciated the input from the CAC.
Do you want to add anything?
No.
Okay.
I just have a question. Did they take a vote? And what was the result?
Yes, they did on the option 1, 2, and 3, just like we did. And I believe it was option 3 that came out as the
Yeah, I was curious about the count.
Sorry. Yeah, there were, I think it was similar, well, let's see, they didn't do like, do you vote for option 1, 2, or 3, although there was some discussion about that. I think in the end it was a yes or no for option 3. I can't remember now exactly how they did it. Anyway,
Maybe you could look it up there.
I'm looking at my notes here, and my notes aren't all that clear, sorry. But I think they basically came out essentially where we did on the matter.
I have a question. How will we know if the board eventually passes that letter or not? Adopts that letter? About the closing of the applicant. Right now it's on hold, which is disappointing. But how will we know that it's coming back? Will we be told? Will we have to ask you every time?
Ask us, we'll figure it
I
out.
will ask you, I will ask you every meeting.
And we should do that, this will be a topic for next month, we should do that about anything we have questions about like that. And I do think they did take, I don't wanna hold anybody responsible, but the chair, Donna Colson, kinda made people, is that what you wanted to comment on, Kathleen?
I just found the other thing that I wanted to mention, but go ahead, it's your thought.
She kind of got all of them to volunteer to be here on a rotating basis. So I think going forward, we'll have more board participation in our meetings as well. Unsolicited by me, but I was very appreciative of that. So.
And Colleen is on I can see her name. She's on.
Oh, there you go. Well, there you go. Colleen's here right now. Colleen was the most complimentary and championing our work at that meeting as well. So I want to thank her for that too. But,
And there
okay,
was
go ahead,
several
Anthony.
There were several others who expressed
Brisbane.
strong interest in coming to our meetings. The other thing that I wanted to mention was
We get
actually
confused sometimes.
a little bit of a little tidbit of information that probably Sean explained this at our meeting and it just didn't register with me. But the nuclear attribute that we were talking about at the last meeting will not appear on the power content label for Eco 100, which I had not realized. And that was something that came up at the board meeting. So the extent that that is important to anybody, thought I would just pass that on.
All right, and then I think before we'll do public comment at the end, but I would like to invite David. I don't know if everybody here knows David Silverman. He's county council and he's since the beginning, the main attorney for Peninsula Clean Energy. And he's wonderful, as you're about to hear. If you don't know him, he gets the wonderful task of giving us a quick, high-level Brown Act starting course here. Yes?
Sure. I mean, I was told that folks wanted instruction on serial meeting.
Yes, yes.
I didn't know that they wanted an interview, an overview. I did actually, as you were talking, pull up an overview refresher that I did for the CAC in June of 2021. I could present that in about 8 minutes, or I could just talk about serial meetings and a couple of other things. What's your pleasure?
Let's do serial meetings tonight, and because we do have a big agenda item. And then we'll do the full training at the next meeting, but I think serial meetings would be great tonight.
Okay, well, so first of all, when we talk about the Brown Act, what we're talking about is meetings. And this is a meeting that we're at right now. But actually, any time that a majority of the CAC gets together to talk about something that would be within the jurisdiction of the CAC, so really anything having to do with Peninsula Clean Energy, in a group of a majority, that is actually a meeting. And you can't do that unless it is publicly agendized, usually 3 days in advance. So your magic number is 8. There are 15 of you, and so a majority of you is 8. So 8 of you cannot get together as a group and talk about anything that really relates to Peninsula Clean Energy. A serial meeting, and then there's also a corollary of it, often referred to as a hub and spoke meeting, is when you basically achieve the equivalent of meeting as a group of 8, but you do it in part. So with a serial meeting, it would be something like where Kathleen started. And I don't mean to pick on Kathleen, but her name's right in front of me. And I'm sorry, Kathleen, you actually have to have your camera on. If you had to turn it off for a second, that's fine, but generally you're required to keep it on. Sorry about that. So, you know, Kathleen decides she wants to talk about nuclear energy because she really is passionate about nuclear energy. And then she then talks to 7 other CAC members individually, one-on-one, about nuclear energy and what the CAC should recommend with respect to nuclear energy. That would be a violation of the Brown Act via a serial meeting. The other way that folks can violate the Brown Act, sometimes by accident, is via hub and spoke. And that's actually, the hub is usually a staff member. And one of the cool things about being a staff member, and for those of you who don't know me, I make jokes and I have a very dry sense of humor. You know, I'm trying to be a little silly, so hopefully you won't mind. The cool thing about being a staff member is I can't violate the Brown Act. I can only cause you as board members to violate the Brown Act. So if I go to Kathleen and I say, hey, Kathleen, I want to know whether the board will, or the CAC will support a resolution against nuclear energy. And I'm going to go to 7 other people and I'm going to find out what 7 other people have to say about that. And I'm going to report it back to all of you so that you know in advance whether that motion will pass. I am now causing a Brown Act violation, you to violate the Brown Act by hub and spoke. So how do you avoid that? You know, you can talk in groups of 2, 3, 4. You can speak with staff about things, but don't speak to a majority of the members. And if staff comes in and starts to talk to you, and we won't do this, but if we come to talk to you about something, that's fine. But if we start telling you about what we've talked about with other board members, you just say, hey, wait a second, I don't think that you should do that. So that's really the serial meeting and the hub and spoke issue. I mean, as far as other other sort of pitfalls in the Brown Act, there really aren't very many. I mean, obviously, when folks want to talk about something that's not on the agenda, sometimes that happens. You can make brief comments, in response to, public comment. You can share generally things when you give your reports, but you can't start a robust conversation about, nuclear energy when you're supposed to be talking about the strategic framework. So that would be a Brown Act violation. The other thing that sometimes people do is they get a little casual with their email. They'll email multiple commission members or their forward emails. Generally speaking, you shouldn't be emailing groups of CAC members. That's probably not the best idea. So I guess you're going to get more training next month. Hopefully that satisfies overview. I've also Colleen in the chat noted social media. So actually the social media rules have changed and gotten actually way more complicated and way more simple than they used to be. It used to be, and Colleen, referenced this, like if you were to go on a social media site and you were all to interact together with the same social media posting, that used to be a problem. It's actually, I don't recommend it, but the rule, you know what, this is complicated. I'm going to leave it to Jennifer to straighten it out next meeting. But a new law was actually enacted 2 years ago that addresses social media, and Jennifer can cover it in detail in November.
Thanks, David. I just really quickly, I've been in Brown Act bodies for 25 consecutive years. I've been accused of violating the Brown Act in court 25 years ago, so I can speak to that later. But the main point is, it's invented so that the public has the right to transparently know what we're doing and that stuff doesn't go on behind the scenes. It goes out in the light of day in the public. And so that's the guiding principle for this, is that we have an agenda, so we don't go off it, so the public has a chance to respond, be here, represent themselves. And that's the whole purpose of this whole thing. So it may seem onerous at times, but it's for that good purpose. And again, thank you, David, for doing that. Is there any public comment on that extended chair report? Okay, great. I have one last thing, which I want to thank the staff. They've always been incredible, but for the last month or so, while I've been trying to figure out what we're doing here, they've been incredibly helpful to me. I just want to thank all of you, and I'll thank you more specifically in the future, but it's not on the agenda, so I'm not going to speak to it too much. I am going to ask if there's any, we're going to skip member introductions to get to the meat of the meeting, but is there any public comment on member introductions that we're not having? Okay. Then with that, I'm going to move on to number 4, which is the discussion of Peninsula Clean Energy's strategic framework. And I would recommend everybody look at the slide. Well, I guess we're going to see them, so you can follow along. And who's going to introduce our illustrious consultants?
I can do it.
Great.
Hi everyone, I'm Shalini Swaroop. I'm the new/old Chief Operating Officer, because it turns out I've been at PCE for almost a year. So it turns out what they say about your days are short, but your years are long, or the other way around. The days are long, the years are short. That's what happened to me. I had an infant when I started, now she's a toddler. So I'm sorry I haven't gotten to all of you a little bit earlier. So I have about a little bit over a decade of experience working in community choice aggregators. Specifically, I work at MCE, most recently as their Chief Legal and Policy Officer. Before that, I was a lawyer. I guess I'm still a lawyer on behalf of low-income communities and communities of color before the Public Utilities Commission. So I do bring sort of an advocate's lens and environmental justice lens. And most exciting for me for this meeting, I used to chair the Power Subcommittee of the San Francisco Public Utilities Commission, CAC. So this is kind of a fun, weird way for me to be interacting with you all, because I used to be sitting in your seats. So I'm just really excited to be here tonight and to introduce our great consultants from La Piana Consulting. We have Lester Olmsted Rose here, sitting here next to me, and Browse Fight on video there. Brow's coming to us from 10 p.m. in the future. So thank you, Brow, for being here with us. And we're just super excited to dig in. I want to note that today, and even for the board retreat, we're not really looking for answers to the questions. We're trying to understand what your discussion is going to be, what you want to know about the questions, where your priorities are. It's not necessarily to pick one option, but really to understand where you all are coming from, and the options are there just for discussion. So no decisions are being made today, no decisions are being made at the board retreat. So just keep that in mind, and we're really just looking to get a window into your brains for today. So thank you so much. And with that, we want to do a time check on how much time we have. Kristen?
Hour and a half.
Hour and a half. All right. With that, I'll pass it off to Lester.
Great. Thanks, everybody. I'm actually going to stand up just for a few minutes so I can see everybody down this way. I met a few of you several weeks ago. So it's nice to be here in person and meet the rest of you. So we're gonna cover tonight, we're gonna try to really quickly just say this is the process we're engaged in, just to give you a little of that background. But mostly we want to get into these 3 critical questions. I know we sent you a lengthy packet of information in advance. I apologize for that, and we keep trying to slim it and make it more streamlined, and it's really hard to do. So thank you for bearing with us on that. So we will give kind of introductions to everything that we present, and insofar as we have time, we'll have some discussion. But I just want to also invite you right now, and I will probably say this 3 or 4 more times, you can always send us your thoughts later as well. You can always send an email or reach out in some other fashion. Or you can also, sorry, Kirsten, you can also reach out to Kirsten and Vanessa if you have thoughts, and they'll relay it to us also.
As long as you don't CC everybody else, right, David?
Correct. No serial meetings. Thank you for that. Thank you for that.
I'm still a lawyer.
Yes, you're still a lawyer. So the way we're approaching this project, this is the way we think about strategy development. So this is a strategic planning process. But the way La Piana Consulting comes at this is we see a whole lot of strategic plans that have a whole lot of things people are gonna do, and they don't necessarily add up to any strategy. And the way we think of strategy is kind of directional. What are you focusing on as an organization? And so the way we're approaching this is to really focus on what we call organizational strategy. What you're gonna hear me use some terms that are all kind of interchangeable. Organizational strategy is what we use generically. For this project, I'm really thinking of it as strategic policy. So there are some policy issues, some stances that are kind of burning for PCE that need resolution. And if those questions, those are the three critical questions that you've all read diligently in your packet. If you have answers to those three critical questions, that creates focus and direction to staff. Once staff has that, then they can go into the program and look at programmatic policy to align, and they can look at operational strategy to align, if that makes sense. So we're deep in this question of organizational strategy, or again, as I'm calling it, strategic policy making. And again, those issues are the answers to those three critical questions that we're going to talk about tonight. There we go. I'm actually going to go ahead and skip these. This is just where we are overall. Just to be really clear, we did speak with some people in this room and some other folks and some staff and board members early on, and that was kind of find our way through the issues facing the organization. As Shalini said, and I can't emphasize it enough, there's no decisions tonight. There are no decisions at the board meeting, at the board retreat. We're really driving towards January for a board decision at that top level of that pyramid, the organizational strategy. So right now we are vetting. If you see those, what we are doing now, those three bullets, those are all about vetting, kind of teeing up the questions. Getting information from people. So these are the three critical questions that we're focused on. The first one is about PCE's procurement priorities and how those, how to balance the affordability within your procurement priorities. And we're going to talk about that a little bit more before we get into a conversation. The second area is about how to deliver programs and services within an equity framework, while also, of course, scaling decarbonization. And then the third one, I call this the existential question. Are there lines of business that PCE either needs to do, enhance something it's doing or start doing something? Because as the industry changes, PCE needs to adapt to succeed at what PCE is doing. It needs to be doing something more, something different. Anyway, so we will talk more about that also. So those are the three things we're really focused on. And again, ultimately in January, we're looking for the board to adopt policy-oriented answers to these questions that give direction to staff and to the organization over, let's say, 5 years. It might be a little bit less, a little bit more, but we're going to talk about 5 years. Yes, Robert.
First of all, you never have to apologize for sending something out early. I do read it.
We're apologizing for the length of the document, not sending it early, but yes.
It's good stuff. I did read it all. So thank you for sending it out early. Second question is, I want to make sure I get this, but I had to read it 3 times. It might be my brain. When you talk about affordability concerns, you're talking about the price that PCE has to pay for the energy that purchases. You're not talking about affordability to the customer.
No, I thought exactly the opposite, so please answer that.
Yeah, we will go into more detail. In my mind, these two are going to answer that because we're going to go through that context here. In my mind, they're not indistinguishable. So, but we were, at least in my mind, we were focused a little bit more on affordability to the customer, but that of course is easier to do if you can also purchase at a better price. And that gets in then to the the greenhouse gas free purchase and renewable purchase, you know, because as. Anyway, sorry,
Thank you.
now I'm digging myself into a hole. So we will go into that in more detail. Thanks for the question. Anything else? Any other questions off the bat? Okay, I kept telling Yana and Shalini that they have the hard work tonight. So we're gonna start with this one. Some context.
Yeah, so I'm gonna kick us off with some context on critical question 1. I'm going to try to go a little bit quickly because really the meat of it is the discussion, but we want to make sure you all understand. So essentially, SB 100 passed in 2018 said that all retail electricity sources in the state of California need to be zero carbon by 2045. So all the other PCE and all the other load serving entities, PG&E, SoCal Edison, San Francisco Public Utilities Commission, everyone is driving towards their greenhouse gas free goals by buying more greenhouse gas free energy and renewable energy, right? But there's sort of an interesting conundrum here sometimes because the power content label that everybody gets in their mail once a year that says this is what you're buying from PCE or PG&E, that measures emissions on an annual basis. So what ends up happening is when you have excess solar in the middle of the day, it's being used somewhere on the grid, but maybe not necessarily exactly matching your load. So over the year, you can kind of bank up that solar and you can apply it to your year of renewable energy purchases. So in an hour by hour framework, your load isn't necessarily following your supply. And so that can be a little bit confusing. And so that's why we look at annual greenhouse gas emissions for state purposes. And for the state purposes, that's what's on the power content label. And so this sort of annual framework is important because, as you all know, PCE has this amazing goal to maximize our 24/7 hourly matching. So basically when the load is being used, that's when we want to supply it in renewable energy. So that's our long-term goal. Our short-term goal is to do 100% renewable energy on an annual basis by 2030. So I just kind of want to draw the distinction between annual versus hourly, because that's kind of where we get at what kind of green energy, which I said I would never use the word green energy again, but what kind of energy are we buying? So I'm going to, and then I will also just say that because of supply chain issues and inflation and new market demand for clean power, partially because of the growth of CCAs, renewable energy is becoming more and more and more expensive, which then in turn affects the affordability of how much it costs to customers and the bills everyone receives every month. So with that, we can move to the next slide. Oh, wait, do I have I can do it, Lester. Thank you.
Okay.
So what I really want to focus on this slide is greenhouse gas free energy and renewable energy. In California, there's a statute that says renewable energy is only solar, wind, geothermal, small hydroelectric, biopower, ocean thermal, and tidal. Never heard of an ocean facility. So greenhouse gas free is all of those and the large hydro and nuclear. So that's the distinction between greenhouse gas free and renewable, is essentially large dams and nuclear energy. And so that's really, and the cost differential, renewable energy is, let's say, 3 times as expensive-ish as greenhouse gas free energy. I think I also already talked a little bit about the 24/7 time coincident and matching goal. So I think the important thing to know is that the board in April decided that in order to ensure that rates continue to be affordable and a little bit less than PG&E, we decided to adjust our 24/7 goal to be a little bit longer to ensure that they were essentially our rates were cheaper. So I think I already belabored that point, so I'll keep moving. So after let me stop there. Are there any questions about that before we get to how we want to stack up some of these factors? Yes.
I have a question on when we get to complete carbon free or renewable by 2045, the annual won't make a difference, right? Because it'll be all carbon free.
Well, no one really knows how we're gonna calculate that in 2045. So we might still be calculating it annually versus hourly.
But I'm saying that matter, we'll have no coal, no gas, nothing that burns carbon, right?
Well, if you're looking at a day and you have extra solar on the grid in the middle of the day, but you use gas in the evenings, that day, if you're looking at it like an annual accounting, it'll still look like you had renewable energy all day, even when you were relying on gas in the evening, because the amount of solar that you had offset the gas usage. So it will still look like it's completely renewable, but you'll still be relying on natural gas. And that's the
On an annual
confusing
basis,
part.
not on a
You're
24/7.
still burning gas and it's still going into the environment. I
Right.
don't get.
It's an accounting system that's set up by the state. And so far, Peninsula Clean Energy has followed that accounting system. We may not always want to, and that's part of the discussion now.
Well, the following, is this 24/7 really 24/7, or is it accounting for sometimes you use it, sometimes you don't use it?
24/7 is really 24/7.
Okay, then to get back, that's the question he's asking. If you are 24/7, 365 days a year, it won't matter. I think that's what you're asking.
Well, the law says 0 carbon by 2045, and the current practices are to calculate that annually
So
for the state.
what you're saying, the law in 2045 is not really zero carbon, if you use this accounting method.
Yes, that is true,
Whether
and
it's
thank you for
24/7
clarifying
and
that.
using the daily swings or using annual,
Yeah.
using seasonal swing, it's not really carbon free.
Yes, it's an accounting methodology.
Well, I guess we ought to write a legislature to get rid of that. It sounds a little squirrely to me.
Well, that's part of the discussion, actually, so thank you. Any more questions on that? And that was actually the perfect question, and thank you for raising it that way, because it helps us.
Yeah, I just wanted to clear with that.
Yeah, no, that's really helpful.
Yeah, clear.
Okay, so knowing that information, we have 4 factors. We have the factor 24/7. We have the factor annual 100% renewable. We wrote the power content label, but we mean 100% greenhouse gas free annually. That's essentially what we're doing with the power content label. And then we have affordability. So in option A, we're prioritizing greenhouse gas reduction by trying to get to 24/7 as soon as possible. That means, of course, bills would go up. On the other side of the spectrum, we have option C, the most affordable. This would be prioritizing the state minimum for renewable energy and making rates as affordable as possible for our customers. That's the other end of the spectrum. PCE would likely never do this. I'm just trying to give you sort of a spectrum of where we could go. And second option, option B, is essentially what we're doing now. We're prioritizing annual emissions accounting because that's what's sent to our customers and that's what the state reports on. Then we look at affordability. We're slowly ratcheting up our renewable procurement. And lastly, we're aiming for 24/7 sometime in the next decade or so, right? So that's kind of where we are today. So the question we want to ask for our discussion, which Lester is facilitating, is how do you think that PCE should balance these 4 procurement factors that are driving our decisions? And I'll go back to the 4 factors.
Yeah.
What's the difference in affordability?
It can depend. I would say that's probably data we need to put in. I would say bills right now at option B are slightly lower than PG&E. In option A, they would probably, let's guess, 30 to 50% higher than PG&E. It's really expensive to go 24/7.
You have a factual basis for that, and you have somewhere that shows you this 30, that's a big number. Everybody's gonna remember it.
Okay, let me walk that back.
I'd like to see some, I'd like to see some facts for that.
Okay, Roy presented on that in April at the board meeting, so I can get that for you.
Okay.
Because that's when the board adjusted the goal.
What I just heard you say, if with option A, the cost of PCE's energy will go to the customer, me, will go up 30 to 50%.
It depends on how quickly we're trying to get to 24/7. So let me walk back and say it'll be significantly more expensive. And I can get you data on how much more expensive.
So don't quote 30 to 50.
Well,
We're gonna go back. I know, but it was a good pointed question. So we have to get information to match that, but you can quote a significant amount. Yeah. Yeah.
Question is, because it wasn't presented to us yet. Is that 30 to 50% assuming the status quo stays the same? In terms of the cost of renewables, the cost of carbon producing, because I was just on another call about building codes, and the state's gonna make it very, very, expensive to have carbon, like gas, appliances and stuff in buildings. So the state's increasing regulation to make carbon sources more expensive than renewable or GHG free sources. So is your accounting, accounting for that, change, plus as technology gets better, hopefully renewables will be, cost less.
Well, we can only project out on the data that we have. And right now, the technologies that are cheaper are technologies that the renewable technologies that are cheaper are not helpful for a 24/7 strategy. It'll be like solar, which is excess in the middle of the day. So the technologies that you would want for a 24/7 strategy are currently more expensive.
So that would be like nuclear or dams.
Battery, energy storage, for example, you would need a lot of energy
Battery.
storage, batteries,
Mhm.
yeah.
So we know that you don't have a ton of the information that you need. So we're happy to hear a little bit about, generally, what would it look like? What do you think is the right stance? So for example, if we aren't using numbers, but we're talking about if it's significantly more expensive, how would you weigh these 4 factors?
And let me just clarify that as
Yeah.
soon as possible to me meant like next month, right? So I don't want to, I'm happy to get you more data, but any numbers I was thinking of was based on trying to get to 24/7 in January 2025.
Yeah, and which is probably way more expensive than in 2 years or 3
Yeah,
years.
exactly.
Yeah. So we don't have in front of us specific answers to the projected cost. So, yeah, Michael.
So all 4 of these priorities are desirable.
Right,
Right.
So the question is, how do you balance them?
exactly.
But they're not quite all equal. I would maintain that affordability is a critical one that has to be taken into consideration in every area. Because if we start selling electricity that's significantly more expensive than PG&E's, we're gonna face revolt among our customers. So I don't think we can, I guess my point is, what are our priorities right now? Do we have explicit priorities among these 4?
So you have a de facto,
It wasn't de facto.
you have a de
It
facto
wasn't de facto,
practice,
right.
and these 2 will correct me if Kirsten will correct me if I'm misstating this, to be a little bit below PG&E in
Yeah.
cost. And within
And
that,
within that, then do the rest.
then do the rest.
Yeah.
Exactly.
It's option B where we currently are, right?
Right.
Essentially, yes.
So you could take option B and move it a little bit towards option A, by maybe saying that your tolerance is to be a little bit more expensive than PG&E, but to get to 24/7 faster. So those are good terms to think about this or to respond to it. And what I'm hearing you say, Michael, is we have to stay at least a little bit cheaper than
That's my
PG&E.
opinion, yeah.
Yeah, and we're asking for that opinion, yeah.
Or not more expensive.
Oh, sorry, Kathleen, you just started, I think, to speak, and I just want to say, I always want to invite whoever's on video, that you get to just interrupt and jump in. So if you were just jumping in, please do, then I'll.
Go ahead and finish your thought.
No, that was it. We were ready. Go ahead, Kathleen.
Okay, so I get that what you're trying to get from us right now is just sort of like a conceptual ordering of the priorities, right? And you have a whole lot of detail, but hearing the way was it Shalini was interpreting these factors like 24/7 as soon as possible being, January, I wasn't looking at it that way. When I looked at this, it was like, okay, as soon as possible, that might be within, a few years. So it feels like we've kind of been presented with false choices here, or false dichotomies. So I'm trying to look at this conceptually the way you're asking us to, but the way some of these terms are being defined feels like it's setting it up to be something different. I don't know if I'm making any sense here, but if we define 24/7 differently than the way it was presented a moment ago, then option A might not be as dramatically more expensive, perhaps. And so that would affect how I think we might order some of these things.
Kathleen, this isn't quite what you said, but I want to suggest this because I think it's what you're getting at, which is if, for example, 24/7 meant being a small amount more expensive than PG&E for 5 years, and you could get there in 5 years to 24/7, like that might be worth it. It's not worth it if it would be 30, now I'm using this number on purpose, 30 to 50% more to get there in a year. Is that kind of the idea you're trying to get at?
I think that's one way to look at it, yeah.
Okay, thank you. You had a comment.
Yeah, I'm just gonna make like a general observation about affordability. And I totally understand the need for rates to be affordable for those that need them to be affordable. But like addressing climate change is not necessarily gonna be affordable. So like the last two events in the last week, estimated damage is $350 billion. That's the entire Inflation Reduction Act in a week. So I just think there might be a little room to think about the cost of addressing climate change in this discussion, and that maybe some things aren't going to be affordable for those that can afford it, but let's make sure that those that need things to be affordable are affordable.
Yeah, thank you. That's very helpful.
I'm going to take my jump in privilege and just second what John said, and also note that there are ways to make it affordable for those who most need the assistance without necessarily requiring the cost to be low for everybody. I don't know how, we've got all these assistance programs for people who meet certain income criteria, that sort of thing. So I think we also need to think about the fact that there are adjustments that can be made for affordability where it's most needed.
Yeah.
I don't want my bills going up either, but
Right. So as a policy, that means you'd be willing to have power be more expensive as long as there are programs to keep power affordable for those who are least able to pay.
Yeah,
I think is what
some
you
people
two
can
are saying.
afford it, some people can't.
Yeah.
But we need to make sure everybody can be served without breaking their bank.
Yeah, great. Thank you. Yeah.
I came into this discussion thinking that way, but people are pretty mad about the rates where they are right now, and I feel like it's high electricity rates are a hindrance to electrification, which a lot of us want to see go forward to address climate change. And if we don't prioritize affordability as a way to make electrification possible, I worry that we're a little bit shooting ourselves in the foot.
Yeah.
I mean, I think we all share the same goals and there are different ways to get there, but lately with the high rates and a little bit of anxiety about backlash against electrification because of the high rates. I started off at option A and then jumped to option C because I want to support electrification.
Yeah.
And I don't know if there are ways to put boundaries on affordability, like affordability as a way to facilitate electrification or level the playing field for electrification, not just to keep things cheap. Because for people who really desperately need rate assistance, that's there. But then for the rest of ratepayers, the public, people might not self-identify and say, oh, I need help on my power bill. They might just feel bitter about having to go electric and feeling like they're paying more than they would be if they were using gas.
Yeah, that's really helpful. Thank you. And there should be a way to do what you're asking. That's why I keep using that word policy. So you could adopt a policy that says keep our rates at a level that is affordable enough so that electrification is incentivized. And then you can do the studies or whatever to know what that point is. We see it every time there's a gas crisis, right? People buy small cars. Yeah, Robert.
I also want to second what John said and kind of key off a little bit of what Diana raised. Affordability means we have to accept gas or some other parts in the mix that we can't deal with the climate crisis. We say, yay, we got affordability, but we haven't done anything for the climate crisis. How do we get to a place? I don't mind going to my friends and my colleagues and saying, it's going to cost you more. As John just said, it's going to cost you more now or later. Which would you rather have? Would you rather manage it? Would you rather deal with the climate crisis now? Or you want to just let it happen and then you deal with it then, which you can. So my preference is A, and then you say to me, you got to go explain that to the people in the community. You got to put your name on it. You got to stand up there and be responsible for it happening. That's why I joined this group, so that I could be responsible. I mean, we're sort of selling electricity, aren't we? But we're selling response to the climate crisis. So I'm willing to sell A.
That's great. And I think one of the ideas that came up is actually having different I can't use that word, different options for customers. So customers could buy into a higher price that is 24/7. I think we talked about that a little bit.
We have two products right now.
You have that now? Yeah.
Not a 24/7 product, but
right. So there is a way you could differentiate that way. Yeah, Michael.
So the problem with de-emphasizing affordability is that for the general public is the primary consideration, unfortunately. If greenhouse gas emissions and climate change were their top priority, like they are for most of us, then, and assuming we can afford it, we would definitely go for a more expensive electricity if we can achieve those other goals better. So it says to me that part of the solution is that Peninsula Clean Energy has to do more public education about the trade-offs here. And indeed, if we're going to, if we're really going to combat climate change as an entity, we've got to make that a priority, and then some other priorities will be less critical in terms of cost.
So again, you can always push back when I do this. What I hear you saying, sound like a consultant, is that no matter what, there needs to be more public education. I don't think that ends the need for PCE to make a choice.
But except that then you probably have to put more money into public education too, and more creativity.
Although that's relatively inexpensive, but but it needs to be accompanied by that. Remy.
Actually, I want to second what Kathleen said. Johnson, I think we ran out of time. It's evidenced by 2 hurricanes in 2 weeks down the southeast, causing billions of dollars, are basically wiping out infrastructure. Yeah. So that being said, it seems to want us to gravitate towards option A, which is the clean, getting the GHG freeze, but today. And I think we can get there because we are in the valley of the billionaires and billionaires here. So we could say, okay, we'll deliver energy to the FERA customers, PG&E, just below PG&E rates. And we'll deliver energy to the middle class in our service area, just below PG&E rate. And then, you know, for anybody that's in that high income that makes thousands times X of their workers in their companies or factories, you know, tech companies, whatever it is, those guys and gals get to pay, you know, a premium, you know. And we basically have one product, which is completely GHG free, but have a tiered rating, a billing rate based on income.
Yeah.
Which can be easily verified by some of these 1040.
Yeah. I shouldn't do this. I will just say there's been a lot of conversation about, actually, we're going to get into this in the next question, so I'm going to preview it for you. There's been a lot of question about income or other measures. You know, we've been using the word equity, that there's a difference between income and wealth. So I'm just pointing that out, that there's a lot of conversation about that. Cheryl.
I love hearing everybody's opinions, but aren't some of the options that we're going to discuss later about lines of business that PC&E would be in and all that, aren't those going to affect like the whole picture? I mean, how much money PCE has, so it seems premature for us to get too invested in putting a stake in the ground right now about the priorities.
Yeah, sure, they all come together. I find it can be really helpful to segment those decisions a little bit, and then you start putting them together and see how they all come together, how they all fit. So, you know, it's helpful to think right now, and to get this kind of feedback is really great. Like, what is the balance of these characteristics? Yeah.
Well, just for discussion purposes, and I acknowledge this is naive and not practical, but I'm gonna do it anyways. My interest would be in option A, for all the reasons people have said, but I also agree with what Diane said, but to me, the lever you can pull, which we can't yet, on affordability, is getting rid of the PCIA, getting rid of the PG&E rate hikes to cover their destruction of the state, getting rid of the cost to do these things that are artificially inflated to cover past mistakes. If we attack that, which we can't do as PCE, then the affordability question gets reduced and you can focus on the problem. So in this discussion, I don't want to leave out that affordability lever can be balanced beyond the group, in theory, if we had the political will for that. So I think, for me, my goal would be to do in this framework, the A option, and do whatever we can and spend whatever money you could on fixing how the costs have been increased because of the damage done.
Yeah, and for what it's worth, under other lines of business, it's kind of nice language in there, which is kind of increase your advocacy around electric issues in the state. So that's Jason, what I hear you speaking to.
So Kathleen has her hand raised, but it's 7:30.
I'm managing the time. Thank you for that, my reminder. And you two should jump in, Yana and Shalini, if you want to respond or add to these. Kathleen.
Yeah, so you have 4 factors here that you're asking us to, you know, how they should be ranked. But we've only been given 3 options, and it seems to me, I don't remember how you do the math, but there's at least a dozen different ways you could order these 4 factors. So I'm wondering, were others eliminated for some reason, or were these just presented as kind of examples?
Thank you.
We shouldn't be limiting ourselves to these 3 and picking one. I think we might need to shift them around a little bit.
Yeah, and I really appreciate that question. There are 4 primary factors. What we intentionally did was created kind of 2 extremes, like most affordable and most clean, even though we promised we weren't going to use clean energy or green energy terms. And then in the middle is this kind of balanced priorities. So that one in the middle can be emphasized in all kinds of, honestly, somehow you're going to end up somewhere in the middle. And what we're trying to do is test your sensibilities. Like, do you tilt towards option A? Do you tilt towards option C? And what your thinking is. But yeah, so we purposely made it 3 options, 2 being kind of the extremes, and the middle one being mushy that could go in all kinds of directions. Other thoughts on this? I love your reactions to this.
We're gonna take public comment. We have some online already. We have some in the room. We'll do that at each question. So please, though, be concise if you could. You want to do the online one first?
Make it 2 minutes.
Yeah, let's limit it to 2 minutes, I guess, please.
I mean, if you want, you can do it all the public comment at the end, if you choose. You could do
I
it
just
each,
don't-
but
don't
you
wanna
can also
lose-
do it at the end.
The one online, I believe, is reflecting to this point or reacting to this point, so I don't want to leave it to the end if we forget the thread.
Okay, oh, I see we have, Tom. You have your hand raised. I will invite you to unmute and give your public comment.
Thank you very much. Looking at the issue, and I have been an electric resource planner for a long time, and am very interested in climate preservation and decarbonization. But looking at how to make the most progress and where our CCA can do that and demonstrate meaningful leadership for other folks who can follow promptly behind us, I think it doesn't make sense to surge to the front and to buy the most expensive solutions to 24/7 greenhouse gas free energy right now, because those solutions will get better if we give them time. It is now the most expensive time to try to go 24/7 greenhouse gas free. It will get cheaper, but the place where I think we really can show leadership that others can follow would be by going towards something like option C that generates some savings that can be plowed into further fossil fuel reduction and electrification in our community. And that's where I think we can really make a net difference and use our money wisely. So my problem with what's on slide 10 is it's not looking at the fossil fuels used by the furnaces, water heaters, et cetera, of our customers. And we need to kind of expand a little bit out of the box on the slide and think about using the savings made available by option C to make additional progress, especially in the justice communities and what we can do there. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thanks again, Brian Schmidt, Menlo Spark. A couple quick comments. First of all, if in staff's mind that as soon as possible has a date to it, then that date should be expressed. I think if you turn it to something that's multiple years in the future, then that opens up a lot of possibilities. I would like to suggest a definition of affordability that would be the minimum marker. And what PC should want for affordability is affordability that is performance-based, meaning you do not lose market share to your competition. As much as I'm sure the top 5% of households will be fine regardless of what PCE does, if we price electricity for them at a rate that's too high, they're going to switch to the competition. So that's a grounding that would have to be done. And on that basis, you could think of maybe a different option. I was thinking calling it A prime, but maybe I'd call it A plus. And that option would be meet that minimum definition of affordability as a performance. Maybe extend out the time period for what 24/7 is, but otherwise prioritize trying to achieve the maximum in greenhouse gas emission reductions. Thank you. Oh, just one other final question, which is related to that timeline, is what are the assumptions on the prices for battery storage? Because that is definitely dropping and dropping fast if you're just thinking even 2 years into the future. Thanks.
Thank you. Yeah, to me, it's a big takeaway that to make sure we factor in the time element into this conversation. So, are those all the comments? Sorry, Jess, I didn't mean to step in. So why don't we move on to the next question then? This was great. Thank you.
Yeah, just me again. Thank you. All right, so next we're going to talk about question 2, which is how can PCE continue to deliver programs and services within an equity framework while also scaling decarbonization? So as you all know, PCE has a really robust suite of customer programs for decarbonizing homes and businesses, while also considering equity goals. So PCE currently invests about 25% of its program's budget into serving low-income customers. And I want to be clear about what I mean by our programs budget, because right now our programs budget is almost all from our generation revenues. It's money we're getting from our customers through their bills. There are also separate state programs that we're beginning to apply for that also serve low-income customers. So in this question, we're looking just at PCE's revenues that are coming into PCE, not necessarily other money that PCE is going after for its customers. So I just want to be clear about that. The real thing that we're looking at is how can we balance offering programs serving equity customers with those focusing on achieving the largest amount of decarbonization. So some thoughts that we have are, what we were just talking about, wealth segments versus income. How are we defining who is an equity customer? There's lots of different considerations. There's communities that have been disproportionately impacted by the fossil fuel economy. We don't have gas plants here, but we do have communities near highways, right? And the highways are running on, the cars are running on gas. There are communities that have traditionally been underserved by our programs, like renters, for example. There is the low-income customers that we serve also. It's defined by the state what low income is, so it's relatively straightforward to serve those folks and identify and serve. And then disadvantaged communities. So these are some of the ways we can look at who equity customer might be. There are also other ways, and we're very welcome to hearing your feedback on that. So we're looking at the right balance about improving affordability through programs, but also we have different rates initiatives too, right? We got, last December, we had a $300 rebate to our Care and Farah customers. That wasn't necessarily a program, but it was a rebate essentially that we gave to all of our folks enrolled in the low-income program. So for the purposes of this question, we're kind of putting it all on the table. How would we want to serve which groups? Rates, bill assistance, different programs, and which customers are we trying to serve? So we have some it's good to note, we developed a really robust DEAI framework in 2022 that I'm sure you are all very familiar with. And this question is really just addressing a small portion of that DEAI framework. That DEAI framework covers a lot more than how we're spending our money in certain communities. I already discussed the CPUC ratepayer funds. Do you want to say anything about this last point, Yana?
Why don't we keep that for discussion?
Okay.
I think it comes up, yeah.
All right. So definitions, we're using equity customer as sort of an umbrella term to mean any community you really want to focus on. It could be underserved customers, low-income customers, historically impacted communities, disadvantaged communities, or any other definitions you might want to put forward today. We're really interested in hearing the feedback that you all have. So the question we're getting into, options, right? So like the earlier question, we have sort of two ends of the spectrum and one in the middle. And we really are looking for that A prime or C prime sort of approach. We're not looking for, yes, we like this option. So under option A, PCE would prioritize offering programs to achieve the greatest access for equity customers. And again, you all are welcome to define equity customers, while taking every step possible to achieve PCE's decarbonization goals. In option B, PCE would prioritize development of programs likely to provide the greatest rates of decarbonization for equity customers and will set minimum goals for serving these customers. And then in option C, PCE would invest in programs based solely on achieving the greatest level of decarbonization, and we would still meet our equity goals through other programs such as bill assistance, cheaper rates, rebates, or other ideas that we're welcome to hear from you all today. So the question is, are there other ways to further provide services for equity customers, however you want to define it, besides through our programs?
And if you also, you can run a little afield, you don't have to like limit your answers to this specific question. We thought it was a good place to start. We were chatting earlier and thinking, be kind of interesting to hear your thoughts also on kind of all those different ways of thinking about equity customers, like what's most important. But again, we're trying to get at this balance of equity and greenhouse gas reduction. So thoughts on this? I'm gonna put these options back up. Are there other ways? Are there other ways to provide services for equity customers besides through your programs? Yeah.
So I have a question.
Yeah.
So if you haven't defined your equity customers, how do you know what they want? So, and this question comes up a lot because I work at the university. You don't want to give them something they don't want. So it does help to find out what their needs are and what their interests are, so you can frame it that it's beneficial to them.
Right. So when you see these kind of 4 definitions of equity customer, you're saying, I think your response is fine. What would you do for each of these different classes? And you would do it based on what you have learned from the folks themselves, rather than just pretending you know what's best. Yeah. Thanks. Yeah.
Well, I'll just point out that PCE does have a robust outreach program where they give grants to community organizations that are working in these communities to hear those voices. So I know that the effort's being made. I'm sure Kirsten and Vanessa could talk to the information they've gathered and how it's shaped PCE. But I know that process is in place to hear those voices. But maybe it needs to be more robust, or more resources need to be put towards that. I just wanted to offer that.
Yeah. Yeah, Robert.
Somebody touched on it earlier about going back to the legislature to change the rules, make them more accommodating for PC, et cetera. It seems to me something that you could do is put more time and energy into community solar. I'm gonna go way out on a limb here. Having distributed energy resources on roofs, helping homeowners here put solar on the roofs rather than having to buy it from somebody else. I know that's impossible now, probably under current laws, but perhaps you can dig into that and see how much energy you can create here. Buying it from 100 miles away, 200 miles away, it has to be brought in or put into the system, and you pay a fee for that. The more you can have the distributed energy resources here, and you have to get laws changed, the better it will be for you. So I offer that as an option.
So let's forget about whether it's legal or not, just for a minute, like that idea. So a
It's legal,
lot
not
of,
allowed.
but a lot of programs that do that might do that for everybody. Or they might do it for people who can pay a certain amount as an investment. We're trying to get at the equity question. Would you prioritize that kind of a program where you are bringing it, let's say, to renters, and working with landlords so that renters get the benefit?
Absolutely.
I'm just making that.
That's a good thing to add. I would agree to adding that comment.
Okay, I was trying to make it as a question. So how much of that investment would you put towards equity customers that are somehow defined?
Since about 50% of the folks who live in San Mateo County are renters, and probably on the lower end of the income scale, I would put a lot of investment for that. I don't know what that means, a lot.
Yeah.
That would be my priority.
Yeah. Great.
I thank you for suggesting it, but
Thanks. I was just trying to get clarity. I'm gonna go Desiree and Malcolm.
Yeah, that's actually the point I wanted to make, is if I'm very proud of what PCE has done regarding equity with low income, but I think renters is an area that we're missing. And with 50% of the county, I mean, we can have our cake and eat it too, right? We can get a lot of decarbonization if we start reaching those 50% of households and seeing them as an equity issue. So if we can have programs for these mom and pop landlords, there's a lot of housing stock that's older in the county. There are 5 units, 10 units, 20 units. But if we can have some sort of assistance or even zero income loans or something for those landlords to be able to upgrade to electric appliances, that's going to have a big effect on both, like just the living situation of people who are renters, but also decarbonization. It's a huge segment that we're missing from actually decarbonizing right now.
Thanks. Actually, Remy had his hand up, so then I'm just gonna work around the table.
Yeah, I think what Desiree and Robert is saying seems to indicate that option C maybe the answer, in that the programs that would achieve the greatest level of carbonization might also be, focused on, those renters areas and the lower income people who own, old SUVs that pollute the air like crazy, getting them out of those vehicles, things like that. And, you can use, the other, needs tested ways to, get them to give up the low cars, or give them the most affordable energy, which, because we're using clean energy, will have to be recalculation. So I think that C is kind of the cake, and you can have your cake and eat it too.
Yeah, so Shalini will correct me, or Yana will correct me if I'm misstating this. Part of the conundrum here is that to achieve decarbonization with equity communities generally is going to cost you more per level of decarbonization that you get. If that makes sense. So you need to put more money in to get the same level of decarbonization.
Robert, Desiree and I are saying, it may be you're going to get the maximum bang for your buck by actually addressing those communities. Because they're the source of the most carbonization. They're in older leaky buildings that haven't been all converted to electric. They drive older cars that pollute more because the cars are old, and so by addressing those lower income folks, you might be getting the greatest level of.
And I'll say it again, to the best of my knowledge. Go ahead. Did you want to say?
I can maybe add a little bit. I've worked in customer programs for 12 years of my life. And so unfortunately, I would love to say it's differently, but how the only way folks like us can make programs successful for low income customers or customers in disadvantaged communities, what we call equity customers. And I'm going to put renters aside right now, but like folks that we call equity customers, you can only make programs work for them if you pay the large majority, if not all of the costs of that remodel. Like take our home upgrade program that maybe you all know. We have a home upgrade program version that is for low income customers. We would not be able to have customers participate in that program if we didn't pay for all of it. We are paying for the heat pump water install, we're paying for the electrification, the energy efficiency. And that is a cost of around $30,000 per home. We're offering that same program to what we call a general market customer. It's a terrible term. It's a non-equity customer. And all we do is we're bringing the cost of the heat pump water heater down to the cost of a comparable gas, heater. So, if a heat pump water heater is $8,000 and a normal gas heater is $6,000, we're giving them $2,000 in incentive. That same retrofit for a non-equity customer costs us $2,000, where it may cost $20,000 to $25,000 for a low-income customer or equity customer. It is the unfortunate reality. For renters, the situation is a little different. I think we're all hearing you on the renter situation. We have already plans to work with multifamily housing more. But for especially low-income customers, there is that cost differential. So we can, serve more customers that are not low income and achieve greater rates of decarbonization, or we can use our funds and do less measure installs but serve more equity customers. That's really the conundrum we find ourselves in.
The exception is policy. For example, our reach codes work affects everyone across the wealth spectrum. It really moves the needle of decarbonization, but it's really a relatively low cost. So I think there's an exception for our policies.
It just means that the property owner has to pay for it, right? Like there are, I mean, we're all assuming that property owners are rich. I'm not sure that's always the case. Yeah.
So that is a conundrum. If it's a quick comment, Desiree, and then I
Oh,
want to.
I guess I think we should keep doing those low income ones. I know they cost a lot more per household. But right now, what we're offering for single family, we don't offer for small apartments. In my apartment building, there's 5 units, there's only 2 water heaters. So you replace those 2 water heaters and now 5 families, every unit there has 2 to 4 people, right? Those have all decarbonized now. So if we could bring that cost of a gas water heater down, or a heat pump water heater down to what a gas water heater would do, to make it so that the landlord has an incentive to change it out, much like we're incentivizing single family homeowners to change out, then I think we can actually do both, right? We can basically expand into the renter area, but still keep those programs for the affordable housing.
So there's certainly a sweet spot. There might be a sweet spot here, which is to do the research to find if there are any programs that are comparable costs for comparable impacts in equity communities for comparable greenhouse gas.
Just think about rent, like rebates or something for landlord.
Yeah.
Small.
But there's still that balance. Yana, and then I'm going to work around the
Really
table.
quickly to address the renters. I'm absolutely, like personally, absolutely for supporting more renters. The challenges, I'm just going to state it as a fact and it's not an opinion. There is what's called a split incentive challenge working with renters, right? You have to work with the property owner as a program manager, and property owners are just not encouraged to install new and innovative and more expensive technologies for renters because they don't live in that home. They will only do that if the thing breaks, if the water heater breaks, and then they may do it if it's easy for them and if it's cost affordable. So
or then they might raise the rate.
And then they may raise the rent. So we are absolutely committed to doing more for renters. It is just much more complex. So I've worked on programs for multifamily. It's very challenging.
This is why we're getting at this question. So did you have your hand up?
Well, I just want to comment on that exact question, because a friend of mine asked me, I'm looking for, well, I asked him, he's got a multifamily unit, and he says, what incentive do I have to do this for his renters, right? So unless we can provide that incentive to make them want to do it. And he's very much supportive and very supportive of climate change actions. But this one, he's really stuck because there's no incentives.
You got to solve the split incentive issue. Did you have your hand up? Sorry.
I did for a moment. It's more of a general wondering, because I know that PC has programs for all of this and they're very effective and they're very good. And just 2 or 3 days ago, the first wave of like multifamily incentives for the Inflation Reduction Act for the state of California went live. And I was wondering, just there's definitely something here where the two can work together to make it even more incentivized. I just don't know what that is, but I wanted to draw attention to it.
Yeah, actually, that's why we hired Yana. So I'm with you. Yana's been looking into half a dozen different state funding mechanisms specifically for equity customers. And so something you guys, I think, or you all recently heard was about the self-generation incentive program. We also recently were awarded partnerships as part of the Equitable Building Decarbonization Project being run through the California Energy Commission. So we are definitely trying to take advantage of all of those state funding opportunities.
Thank you.
Yeah, +1 to everything that Desiree said. And I wanted to speak in favor of option B as the sweet spot, because I think that PC has done a great job investing heavily in its equity customers and programs serving equity customers in the past, as well as in the future with the new turnkey electrification programs that soft launched. But I think that renters have been overlooked, and I understand to your point, Yana, that it's not easy getting the multifamily sector to move, but to Joseph's point, the HERA funding was just announced, and there's gonna be more funding through the IRA, through the state's building decarb, the equitable building decarb programs. And one thing that PC can do is be that technical advisor and central coordinator to help take advantage of all those funding programs and bring multifamily building owners to the table with understanding that regulations are coming and they'll be, you know, kind of pressed into electrification, or they can act early and get support from this agency. So if option B can include a new emphasis on renters, I think that would be really good. But also kind of balance the needs of the agency.
Thank you. Other comments on this one? Yeah.
We have a member, Melee, online, and she had a comment in the chat, and I'd love to invite her to share it verbally with everyone.
Great, thank you. I'm basically just wanted to express that I'm 100% in agreement and agree with option C for the same reason that supporting what Desiree and Remy has expressed in previously. So just wanted to support that option C, that it just makes sense. Thank you.
So option C emphasizes decarbonization kind of first. Just to clarify that, and taking into account working with renters and so forth, but it still emphasizes the decarbonization piece.
That's
correct.
right.
Great,
Yeah.
thank you. Yeah, Remy?
It seems like listening to the conversation, same page. And like what Yana was saying, if we can get the equity, the parity of replacing that gas water heater with the electric water heater, or the gas furnace with a heat pump, right? The landlords will do that as long as it's the equal cost.
Yeah.
That way they can keep the rent low, or they don't have to pass it on. I mean, you can write it in the contract, they cannot, increase the rent because they have this cool little piece of equipment. They have to keep it the same, and then they'll go ahead and do it. But if it costs more for those electric or carbon-free ones, they're not gonna do it. It just, landlord 101.
And then it becomes a choice for PCE about to what extent do you incentivize, let's say, small landlords to install the better equipment if it costs more and impacts fewer families? Like, is it worth it to invest more so that you're serving the renters? I'm sorry?
Versus a larger landlord?
I was just speaking of the mom and pops because that's who was talked about earlier.
Can I ask a
Yes.
question?
Yeah.
Because I feel like there's been a shift in the position of this committee. Option C represents the least investment in equity communities.
Yeah, it
And from a
Programmatic perspective, you're right. Yeah.
Okay, and I'm hearing.
That's not what I was actually saying, but I guess maybe because I was saying have your cake and eat it too. But it's more like, B is.
Yeah.
We would have some amounts we should set as our goal, but I'm saying that we might actually be able to get more decarbonization for our money if we focus on a larger spectrum for equity.
Yeah, and I think I see your hand. We need to wrap up this part and move on, but what I'm not hearing is anybody saying, if there is no, like, we do all the analysis and there is no way to receive the same amount of decarbonization by investing in the best program for equity customers, like it's just gonna cost more. I'm not hearing anybody say, spend a little more for the equity customer, or spend or stay focused on the greatest decarbonization. I'm not hearing a position there. I'm hearing a kind of hope that you can do an analysis and find a way to decarbonize focused on equity customers that gets, the same level of decarbonization. And we'd all like that. Boy, that makes sense. But we're not convinced you can find that sweet spot. Maybe we can. And again, correct me if I'm wrong.
Well, I want to correct something.
Yeah.
I don't think Remy meant to say this, but he implied that I would be in favor of C and equity as C. I'm only in favor of equity under A. And that is, we'll have to spend more money. This is not going to be easy. I mean, to put the burden on me and anybody else who wants to get behind it and go out and sell we're at that point in time with climate crisis. We have to deal with the equity customer and we have to deal with the consumers. So I'm willing for equity. Said there's nobody here to, I'm willing to do equity and spend more money.
Yeah, and we're all.
Just so you know where I am.
Yeah, no, I totally appreciate that. And we're back to the hurricanes. Like you gotta decarbonize quickly, but you know, saying yes, and we have to do it in an equitable way is kind of how I hear that. So. Yeah, exactly. Thank you. Yeah, last comment, and then we're gonna move
I just
on.
want to say I'm for option B.
Okay.
We're going to take really quick public comment, which is one.
Thanks.
We don't have any raised hands right now.
Thanks, Jason.
Thanks again, folks. Brian with Menlo Spark. I wish I had the perfect answer between those three different options. I do have a suggestion as to options B and A. The idea is that there might be somewhat increased emissions, but some type of financial benefit to the underserved equity communities. You might want to try and quantify that. Use the social cost of carbon and say, all right, are those communities actually better off? Because we're going to be creating increased emissions. Those increased emissions have a cost. That's the social cost of carbon. Price it out. And that might help you figure out if you're making communities better off. I would also add that you might want to use, there's all these different social costs of carbon. Use one for equity communities, not just the generalized social cost of carbon. The thing I haven't figured out is how do you apply it to these specific communities here? So I'll leave that to the geniuses at PCD staff to figure out. And the other comment which overlaps to the next question is, as far as figuring out your programs, the lines of business that you might be considering investing in them and working in them in ways that benefit equity communities. Virtual power plants, I think, could be a really good option for that. And whatever obstacles there are with working with equity communities, they're probably more price sensitive than many other communities. So that can give you an ability to use those price sensitive and business lines in a way that works best with those communities. So maybe I'll bring that up later. Thank you.
Thank you. Good. So we're gonna, thanks. That was, again, a very interesting and very helpful conversation. We are going to move on to the next one. I think this one is Yana.
Yes.
You're on control.
Hi, everybody. Just a really quick introduction. Again, I've spoken to you before about the Self-Generation Incentive Program. It's been a while. So Jana Kopechuk-Lande, Associate Director of Innovation Strategy here at PCE. And I'm working with Shalini on the strategic plan. So my world is new and innovative business ideas, program ideas, and this is what we're going to talk about in question 3 now. So question 3 is, are there any new or modified lines of business that PCE should engage in to further support decarbonization and electrification in California? And the background is, you know, we have our core interests and our mission to, you know, decarbonize the grid, to support customers in their transition to clean energy. But as we're moving towards that decarbonization and electrification, we also need to have the confidence that our transmission and distribution grid can actually deliver. We've heard many stories over the last few years that there's new resources that want to come online, customer-sided hospitals, you know, that can't get connected because the grid isn't ready to accept that new capacity. There's also a big trend, you know, happening if one really envisions that beautiful future of DERs that I'm working on every single day. If every customer really were to install generation resources on their site, at some point, folks like PCE lose their business model, right? We're having less and less generation revenue to sell. That's not a bad future for me personally, but what does that mean for PCE as an entity? So those are the kinds of things we're thinking about, really big picture. What do these changes in the energy market mean for PCE's business model? And we should also add that, you know, at this point, PCE really focuses on 2 core business models. We have a power resources team that focuses on installing large, centralized power resources like solar, wind, you know, storage. They're usually in a location where building those resources is cheap, and then they have to be transported far, far with transmission lines into what's called load pockets where people live. So that's our centralized procurement through our power resources team. Then we also have an energy programs team that focuses on bringing behind the meter, what we call behind the meter or customer located resources to customers and businesses. So we're installing solar and storage at a customer's home, at a, local government. We're doing our, heat pump water heater installs. It's our electrification of homes and businesses. So that's on the customer side, but there is that middle. And I'm going to go to the next slide. There is that middle where we're talking a lot about, community solar or microgrids that we're currently not serving a lot. So that is another option for us to focus on in the future. There's a lot of definitions here. I think we don't need to dig into all of them considering how little time we have, but I think everybody knows that, the grid consists of kind of two components. There's the transmission that, are the big power lines that bring power from far away, let's say in the San Joaquin Valley, to the substation. And then there's the distribution grid that brings the power from the substation into the customers' homes. And then when we talk about front of the meter projects, those are those big centralized resources that our power resources team procures to really, these are hundreds of megawatts of generation. And then the behind the meter resources are the ones that are located at the customer sites, and they're usually like 3 to 5 kilowatts. We're talking hundreds of megawatts compared to 3 to 5 kilowatts, much smaller solutions at a customer site. And distributed energy resources is something that's been talked about a lot, and they can actually, a lot of people think when they think distributed energy resources, they think about the 5 kilowatt solar system at a customer home. But those resources can actually also be connected to the distribution grid. So they can be things like community solar or a community microgrid. And those are resources that are really struggling to find a foothold in California. So before I dig into
could you just say why they're struggling to find a foothold? Because it seems so logical.
I know.
And it seems like we need to get all of the eggs out of the PG&E and even the PCE basket. And, the more we can do at our homes, great. So why is it struggling?
It is how the markets are structured, basically. It's there's interconnection challenges for those resources, which is a PG&E issue. There are valuation, there's like payment cost issues. So we have a program, right? Our DAC Green Tariff program, if you maybe have heard of it. It's a publicly funded, state-funded program that PCE runs. We are trying to develop community solar projects, and these community solar projects are typically around 5 megawatts. So again, 5 kilowatts is a customer home, 100 megawatts centralized, 20, 50, 100, and then we're talking 5 megawatts for community solar. The smaller it gets, you don't have economies of scale, the more expensive those resources get. And the intent is usually to have them located where people live and then try to find the land, right? If you're trying to find the land in San Mateo County for a big solar farm, or you're trying to find the land in the San Joaquin Valley, land is unfortunately and obviously much cheaper in the San Joaquin Valley. So it's the cost and the interconnection issues that are the main challenges for doing community solar, for example.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Are they allowable under state law?
Yes. So there's all kinds of definitions. A lot of people define distributed energy resources or community solar in many different ways. So depending on your definition, it's a maybe a yes, maybe a no, but generally community solar is allowed under state laws. Yeah.
So whether it's like a distributed one, like the solar, or one just on one building or one house, does that need to be grid intertied, and then the PG&E power gets cut to the grid, then that house or that distributed network goes down, like you can't operate? Is that seems to be the big problem, the disincentives people from doing that. But right now, I mean, out in Pacifica, we had probably 3 or 4 outages during the storm season. We got a lot of overhead wires, and PG&E don't trim the trees and maintain. And we got a lot of network throughout the state that PG&E's neglected deferred maintenance. causes the wildfires and stuff. And so it seems like if we can just change that little law that says if you wanna take your house off grid, or you wanna take your community, your neighborhood off grid, you should be able to do it. I mean, that's the American way, right? I don't understand how this, the CPUC just kowtows to PG&E and SGE and all the big monopoly power. They're supposed to protect us from monopoly, not.
We can have a whole conversation about this probably for another 2 hours, but the short of it is, you have to be connected to the grid. You kind of really wanted to, because if the grid is your backup, right? It would be very expensive for you to create a clean system with solar and a battery that can really continuously run even if it's cloudy for 3 days. It would be very expensive for you to do that, very expensive. So I think for you as a homeowner, you kind of need the grid, unfortunately. And for community scale, like if the whole community wants to do a community microgrid, that's definitely something that is allowed now in a limited fashion in California. But PG&E will allow it in a very kind of pilot phase.
I'm gonna disagree with you a little bit. I think in the 70s, I grew up, they were started the passive house movement, and they had, because our RMC over in Colorado had these houses that were completely off grid. They generated their own energy. This is in the 70s, mind you, in a cold, Rocky Mountain area, but they had that house functioning completely off grid. So I'm gonna disagree and you.
That is totally okay. Yes.
I would love to see PC invest more heavily and rigorously in community microgrids. And Michael has spoken to this in the past. There was back in 2017, a very deep dive taken into the potential resources throughout San Mateo County for community microgrids. Michael, I want to tee this up for you, but I'll just say, yes, land is a premium here, but we have acres and acres of rooftops that could be much better utilized. And I think it's not just a matter of bringing more renewable energy resources locally, it's a matter of resilience for, given all the power outages and the fact that they're so much more frequent now, to Remy's point. It just seems like an untapped local resource. And yes, it's more challenging to knit together all the different rooftops versus a vast open field in the Central Valley. But it's local, so you avoid all the transmission. And it's a resource that's here for our taking. Michael, can I throw this to you to finish?
Before you throw, I just want to check, Yana,
Yeah.
is there anything more you
No.
wanted to say about the options? Okay,
No, I
great.
mean, we kind of naturally went into actually discussing the possible new or modified lines of business. These are the highlights. We can talk about any of these maybe more in the conversation. I can provide more detail if any of these headers do not.
And just so these are what we're talking about, and the question, as you've seen, it's really about which opportunities are most important. So when you think about the health of PC and its ability to carry out its mission, which are most important to have on the table, and the second is, are we missing anything on this list?
And yeah, maybe let me just actually say one more thing. So just to kind of give a very high level, we've already talked a lot about, the diversifying PC energy supplies, to find that work in the middle, the community solar, the microgrids. We could and should maybe be doing more transmission and distribution infrastructure advocacy. How can we make sure our grid is stable? We're not actually operating the grid. We're not owning the grid, but we need the grid to deliver our product, right? So what do we need to do to make sure that grid is stable? Financial services and partnerships is an opportunity to allow to provide more services to our customers and businesses that they can install these DERs. A lot of people are limited in their ability to pay for these upfront. So if we offer more financial services, lease options, lease to own, power purchase agreements, that would be an option. And then just the second one is, we could provide more technical assistance. We often hear, we don't know how to start. I may even have the funds. I may even be able to pay for this, but I don't even know where to start. We need more kind of technical assistance. So those are a few ideas that staff has brainstormed.
You should start with small landlords.
Yeah, exactly, renters.
Sorry. Thank you. Michael?
Well, I'll be very brief, but as Diane mentioned, I've been pushing staff to work on microgrids and community solar, local solar for 4 or 5 years. And I've actually gotten beaten down. And I didn't even know you existed.
I'm your new friend, Michael.
We got 2 airports here, we can do stuff. No, we can't do that. I've talked about the floating solar on the lake, on
The reservoir.
the reservoir along 280. No, we can't do that. I went down and I talked to someone just in passing about installing some community solar on Bedwell Bayfront Park and oh my God, the board went bananas. Some guy went to the board and said, "You want to ruin our park with solar panels?" God, that would be the worst thing that PCE ever did. Anyhow, I'm trying to exist. I'd like to talk to you. I think there's a lot of possibilities here, not just to noodle around with the 3 and 4 megawatt stuff, but do some bigger projects. And I think, of course, a lot of it does mean we have to move out and start to using our political influence. Speaking of, I was thinking Senator Becker, Josh, he just got legislation about that allows the state highways to have the right of ways used for solar.
Oh, no, I did not know that.
Yes. Let's be entrepreneurial as an organization. This is a
Thank you.
Love the.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm all for building solar on a pre-built environment.
Yeah.
So that's great. And just kind of one idea, I have 2 ideas. One, it sort of ties into what Diane mentioned about microgrids is, there's a recent bill, SB 1221 that just passed. That's going to allow pilot programs for neighborhood scale decarbonization, where you're looking, PG&E and the utilities are providing maps of their gas infrastructure system, and you can target neighborhoods where the infrastructure is due to be replaced soon, and instead of replacing the system, electrify everything. It seems like that could be maybe something that PCE could think about getting involved in, and tying that together with microgrids to make that whole neighborhood one sort of microgrid. I don't know exactly how microgrids work, but it seems like there might be some opportunities there. And then I think one area that needs addressing is large commercial buildings and large multifamily buildings. And maybe there's an opportunity for PCE to provide technical assistance to those building owners, or something because they're a big emitter that isn't really getting addressed in a meaningful way right now.
Kathleen, I don't know how long my hand has been up, but
No, Kathleen, thank you. Kathleen?
Yeah, hi. So some of my points have been raised by other people, so I'm largely going to be just sort of bumping up their comments. I agree with what Diane said about all these unused rooftops. I would also add we have an awful lot of parking lots that would be perhaps ideally suited to this sort of thing. In addition to community solar, I think community storage is something to look into. Michael and I were on a committee last year that was researching all sorts of community microgrids and what have you all around the country. There's some really innovative things going on. And if you haven't seen that, the spreadsheet that we put together with that, I would recommend taking a look at that. Let's see. I also wanted to second John's comments about the opportunities from SB 1221. This is something I've been interested in for quite a while, is neighborhood scale branch pruning of the gas lines. Get rid of the gas lines, neighborhood by neighborhood, and those would be ripe for doing some sort of microgrid or storage projects. And the term resilience came up a few times in some of the comments here. I think that's something that it could be considered a potential. I mean, PCE already does some things that help with resilience. That might be kind of a more focused new line of business. I'm also wondering if that is perhaps yet another factor that ought to be considered under option 1, as looking for, as a priority, focusing on things that would not only help with decarbonization, but also help with resilience. That could be sort of like an extra
sort of plus factor for selecting projects or programs, developing programs, I mean. Thanks.
I'm kind of curious with these, thank you, Kathleen. I'm curious with these great ideas, and Kathleen just summed them up really nicely. I'm kind of curious what you all would see as the best role for PCE in these. If we say all those things you've listed are good things to happen, should PCE be consulting with community groups, kind of aiding them? Maybe it should be going into financial partnerships or providing financial incentives. You know, kind of what is the role of PCE for some of these? Anyway, you can answer a different question if you want.
I think everybody started to address this. I want Stephen to help me with this because a few years ago, I've been on Michael's coattails with the microgrids for 7 years, not 5 years. Hiding behind him as he gets the bullets from all of his endeavors here. The thing that came up when we were doing this 3 working groups ago was PG&E was all in. When Half Moon Bay burned down, and when this thing burned down, and that thing burned down, they didn't want to replace with gas. So they were like, we're gonna do this. And PC was like, we're gonna do this. And it was who's gonna own it? There were all these questions that were big, important questions that didn't get answered. And I think that it should take a leadership role because there's nothing that could be more effective than having a replacement space as a pilot to rebuild no gas, all electric, solar storage, all union labor to build it as a showpiece and then replicate that every time. It's the default position. And VC advocates for that, owns it if they can. And it'd be expensive as heck, but it would be symbolically immeasurable and practically, I think, very valuable too. We've been talking about it.
And contagious.
Right, and we've been talking about it forever, and at the time, and maybe I overstepped, but I talked to PG&E people too, and they were like, yeah, we don't want at the end of the line that burned down in Half Moon Bay. Pescadero, thank you, yes.
Okay, so I'm gonna take it down.
Half Moon Bay. I apologize to the western part of the county, whatever, but the Pescadero, yes.
South of Pescadero.
Okay, but that was the end of the line. It didn't make sense to rebuild with gas at all, so that was the perfect place to try that. And to me, that, I'm trying to pull this all together, but to answer your question, I think they should take a leadership role, at least in making that the default position, if it's possible. And again, we've been talking about this forever.
Yeah.
And there's always some invisible roadblock that I'm sure is valid and expensive, but it seemed like it was a inter-jurisdictional problem that could be overcome, so anyway.
So putting words.
But I want Stephen to say something about this, if he wants to.
Yes.
I want to say all in favor of community solar, raise your hand. I mean, you know, like,
Well,
okay, we decided,
right.
you're done.
PCE's role and what I heard from Jason is that there's a role in some of these things of investing in the model.
Yeah.
Which shows people how to do it. You have a lot of learning and then it can go from there. Somebody has to start.
Oh.
But the other part of it is that there are some structural problems with legislation or PG&E's resistance or whatever that have to be addressed on a bigger scale.
Yeah, but that's what the model approach gets at. You know, and it might make some of that number 4 over there, some of that advocacy work. Cheryl, you had your hand up?
Yeah, this is a goofy little thing, but yeah, I went to this climate summit this week where Kirsten presented and moderated. And I met this banker. He saw that I was drinking out of this thing. And he said, do you work there? And I said, no, I'm a volunteer. I'm on the community advisory committee. But this guy was there from Heritage Bank of Commerce, just looking for opportunities and like ways to invest. And I'm sure that there are other financial institutions out there ready to do this. And the whole purpose of this conference was really to talk about underserved communities. And anyway, I think it's an anecdotal sign from above, that we should talk with some financial services folks and be doing some joint ventures with that.
Thank you. Yeah, go ahead.
I guess I'm just curious, like, are we helping here? Because I'm wondering, are we trying to find new revenue sources for PCE? And if so, have any of these ideas led to that, or do you need different input from us?
This question is not about new revenue sources. Sure, if you had some, that might be great. This question is about things you have to do to best achieve your mission, or because in the long run, you might be put at risk if you don't move in some direction or another. Yeah.
Yeah, I think because their number 4 advocacy is a big deal. That, PC should advocate strongly at the CPUC and the legislature. Because there's money to do these microgrids, if PG&E does not have to, repair all those broken gas lines, all those broken transmission power lines, they're gonna save money. But that money should not go to PG&E, that money should go back to the community to pay for, all electrification or these things to allow them to abandon those dangerous gas lines. Or microgrids to allow them to abandon, a very dangerous, high tension power line that serves a very small community or Pescadero or something. So these big bang for bucks thing. And so I think it has to start with that advocacy because the CPUC is fighting all of that. They're letting PG&E just do what they want, deferred maintenance, and then they have to go and fix things, and then they get to charge the ratepayers after Yazoo to fix that. That's totally wrong. I think, PCV, maybe with all the other, local aggregates and, and cities that actually want to take over their T&Ds, within that city. So get together those guys and advocate and make some real changes at the CPUC, get them out of, being in favor of PG.
Great, thanks. So I'm gonna pull this to a close because our time is up. Is there anybody we need to?
Other or online, I know, you probably wanted to do something, thinking about that.
Thanks again one last time, and thank you for your flexibility. Let me comment on each question. I might be over optimistic, but maybe not, in that it's possible that underserved communities might be electrifying faster than the broader communities. I just gave an example earlier today of Willow Court, the multifamily housing project, and the community of Bellhaven, where we're investing heavily in electrifying those areas, which might give opportunities for lines of businesses that PC is interested in focusing on those areas. It might be different from what people have experienced in the past. So I brought up virtual power plants as an example before. You have a written comment from Eduardo focusing on that as well. That's something where people are given price incentives to share their power storage. And again, underserved communities with harder economic circumstances might be more likely to respond to those price incentives. Smaller homes, they might have more room in their battery to share. And that's where getting to the question about community-based organizations, being able to work with those community-based organizations, I think can help those work. Virtual power plants have the problem of having people understand how they work, and working together with community organizations can make it happen in those communities. So I'd like to suggest that and other lines of business that could potentially benefit underserved communities be ones where you do focus. Microgrids that have been brought up are another example of that. And those things where you might be able to work together with folks, especially when you consider disaster resilience is another advantage of microgrids. And finally, on financial services, when the new BACMID rules come into effect in 2027 and 2029, so people are basically mandated to use electric equipment, it's quite possible that the financial rebates that are currently available are going to get exhausted. There'll just be too many people looking for that equipment. And so an alternative way to make it possible for people to do these replacements would be needed, and financing rather than rebates might be the mechanism to do that. So maybe it should be PCE is the one that's helping make that happen. And then last on what PCE's own stake in this could be is it could have shared ownership in those virtual power plants and in the microgrids, so that it could be part of the power production and power storage that's part of that overall system. Thanks. Last time. Thank you.
It's great. Thank you. Thank you all very much. This was exactly the conversation we were hoping we'd get. We weren't quite sure what kind of conversation we'd have, but this was the one we wanted. So I really, really appreciate it. Super helpful. Oops, you don't need that slide up. I'm just putting up here, that's my email address. If you have further thoughts over the next week or two, feel free to reach out. Again, you can always reach out to Kirsten and to Vanessa, who you know. They will transmit any follow-up to me. This is also in the materials you got, because you got all the slides in advance. So you have that there. Next steps. I think you all know there's a board retreat in a couple of weeks. We're going to have some version of the same conversation. One of the things we were looking for is how this conversation went, and we'll debrief, and we might tweak how we did this a little bit. So thank you for being guinea pigs. That's what I'm saying.
But didn't the board already have this conversation?
No, the board
Oh,
has
they
not
have.
had this
Okay,
conversation. But again, at the board retreat, they're not making any decisions. We're trying to kind of get a sense of where people are coming from. We know that more information is needed. So following the board retreat, staff will work with staff to develop better information on these 3 questions, and tee up, again, what I think of as strategic policy. Like, this is the policy on these issues that we are hoping to have at the January meeting.
Let's just
Yeah, sorry, I thought
quickly,
you had your hand up.
your slide went pretty quick on the, and I think there's one thing that you left out of that list of 6 or 7, is energy efficiency. If we can make the existing buildings, the new buildings more energy efficient, then we'll have less demand for the expensive solar and wind and renewable energies. So that's just a basic, part of like the passive price theory. Okay, because it's cheaper to make the envelope less, more energy efficient than regenerating energy.
Yep, good, thank you.
I
Yeah.
appreciate you coming to us first before the board. I really do. Sometimes we've had things come here after the executive committee. You said, but thank you for taking the time and spending the list very much.
Absolutely. No, and this was sincerely very helpful. Again, the board's not going to be making any decision from my standpoint. It could have kind of been either direction, because we're just gathering input at this point. But thank you. I should just take kind of credit for it, but I think it kind of happened this way. Although staff did say that they like to come to this group first. Okay.
Thank you very much. I want to also agree, didn't see it. We got 2 public comments in advance of the meeting in written form, an email. They were out over here. I'd like to have them attached to the minutes, whatever, however we do that, so that they can part of it. You guys can see that. I think you got them already.
Yeah, we got those 2.
Yes, I want to thank the public commenters in this group, every one of you, including Stephen Jess, participated in the second. That's very good too, so thank you guys very much. And is there any final public comment on this topic? Online? No, great.
Public one, but just one thing, Jason. So, just like Robert was saying, thank you for coming tonight and thank you for coming to the working group before this. And I do hope the working group can meet again in November or December, as things are drafted before it goes to the board.
Very good. Give a round of applause.
They did all the heavy lifting.
Okay, I'm going to go super quick, because I know none of my working groups met, but if anybody else's working groups met, please provide a report. That's not true, what I just said. We didn't meet as much as we hoped, but let me just put it that way. So if anybody wants to do a working group report.
I mean, since the last meeting.
Or in general, yeah.
We had one meeting.
No, I know, but we did it before the last meeting.
Right,
So
we
I'm
did.
just saying, if you want to make any working report, we'll work report. All right, any public comment on the non-reports? Excellent. I think what I would recommend is for next month, we all have at least one meeting or have a report to provide. Because next month's gonna be Brown Act and then these big topics for the rest of the. And I'm gonna post more on the board. Okay. There weren't any public comments on that. Next is our marketing and community liaison up to Kirsten and Vanessa, I think, together.
So, first want to start, it's nearing the end of the year and usually in November or so, the CAC will plan and schedule and approve their schedule for next year. And so we want to get some of your feedback on the timing of these meetings. Traditionally, the CAC always meets on the second Thursday of the month, except for November and December. which is 2 weeks before the board meeting, which is good timing for when you all make a recommendation and take action, then we can bring it to the board in that time. I heard there was some recommendation earlier to potentially explore starting the meetings earlier. So I remember that suggestion from a few meetings ago. So wanted to ask for your input as we start to think about what the schedule should be for next year.
Could we start at 6?
Oh, yeah. 5:30 be even better.
Everybody, yeah.
I'm being serious.
I'm being serious.
You are, okay.
Oh, hell yeah.
Okay, good.
Well, it said, why are we starting so late?
Okay.
Can everybody do that? Yeah.
Can someone send a survey out for folks? Not everyone's here tonight. I want to make sure they get a chance to weigh in, especially, if they're working somewhere far afield.
That's right.
Yeah.
I live 5 minutes from here, so it's easy for me, but I don't know.
Yeah, I didn't think we were gonna make a decision tonight. But no, I was serious about making it a little earlier.
And I think we're gonna be able to, I shouldn't say this, but I think we're gonna have food maybe regularly, if that helps people. But yes, we can do that now.
You'd like it.
But we can, let's think about that too as part of this.
Be great.
Really?
Is there a better night of food? Is there a better night of food for people?
I value the timing because of this stays with the board.
No, I'm talking not the week, but the day.
No, I know, but I still like it being that, it's exactly 2 weeks off every month. For me, that's just my preference, but is there
Yeah,
a
but
day you prefer? We can do that survey too,
Yeah,
right?
we'll say, the day could be put in the survey as well. The day's fine with me. Days, yeah, the day is fine. Just a little earlier would be great.
I'm so habitual, I've gotten used to Thursday. If we shall never know, miss it, I'll come on a Thursday if it's not a Thursday.
Yeah, we can certainly put out a survey. That's a great idea.
Okay, thank you so much. We also wanted to highlight some upcoming events. One is the Electric Home Tour on October 19th. I saw on the website that one of our CAC members, Robert, will be graciously welcoming folks into his home. So thank you so much for participating in that. There's dozens of homes throughout Santa Clara and San Mateo County. And I'll share out the information in the follow-up email, but hope you all can attend.
And help get people to attend.
It is organized by Actera, and we're a sponsor and sending some of our materials and information about our programs to all of the San Mateo County homes.
Just want to add, the time has been shortened, past it was 6 hours, this year it's 4 hours, 11 to 3. We'll see how we'll see how the numbers go. I'm really curious to see how the numbers go.
Any idea why it was starting out?
I don't know.
You want to eat dinner this year? I don't know.
So this is a great event to get to let people know about, get people to this event is our request. Like you all, would probably benefit from it yourselves, but you all know all this. Let people know about this event. This is a really wonderful one for people to actually go talk to homeowners.
Put it on Nextdoor and
Yes.
Facebook.
Yes.
And all those places.
Yes, help us get the word on. Okay, great. And one more event coming up. And Remy, I'm speaking to you on this one, because this is about Pacifica.
Ah.
Yes. The Pacifica Coastside EV Expo coming up Saturday, October 26th. I think this is actually going to be the biggest EV Expo of the fall that I know about. And so again, the folks who put this together, Pacific Environmental Community, they do a great job getting a ton of EVs out there, but they need more participants to come check them out. So again, let people know this is a great place to go check out EVs. The incentives right now for used electric vehicles are amazing. PC, of course, has and many of these incentives are income qualified. For income qualified folks looking for a used EV, get $2,000 from Peninsula Clean Energy, $4,000 from PG&E, and if you turn in like an older vehicle to the state, potentially another $8,000 from the state So people can stack like $16,000 of incentives. We just sort of someone who got a used Chevy Bolt for $4,000. Yes, it's insane. And so PCE has invested more money in our EV advisor service. Because it is a little bit complicated to try to figure out how to stack all the incentives. So just go to our website, fill out the little interest form, talk to our friends at Grid Alternatives, who they're providing this EV advisor service. The convenient thing is they also run the state incentives. They make it really easy for you to stack. So also let your friends know who may be like pitching pennies but need to like buy a new car. It's like, no one's gonna give you that kind of money for a gas car.
You saw this before?
I don't know.
I don't remember half of that.
Okay.
Pretty cool.
Yeah. So yes, get your friends and family also to the EV event in Pacifica. I'm going to be working with the PCE table, but I also would love some help. If anybody is available that Saturday, October 26th. Remy, I'll come talk to you about this also since you live in Pacifica.
What are the hours of that?
Yeah, it's a 10 to 1. So like, yeah, 10 to 1.
Thanks.
Yeah, so check your calendars, let me know if you might be available to come to help out at that one.
Where is it in the town? Do you know?
Oh, it is right across the street from the beach. It's at the parking lot in front of the community center, that community center that's right by the beach. So fabulous location, go stick your toes in the sand right across the street before or afterwards. It's been lovely beach weather in Pacifica. And so yeah, come to beautiful Pacifica and help me talk about EVs.
Any public comment?
Nope, okay.
Any public comment on marketing? Okay,
Nope.
Hear none in the community liaison. All right, upcoming topics for discussion.
Oh, yep, that's me. Hold on a second.
One thing that I would like to do, the Brown Act stuff, obviously for us, so we're gonna do the board thing. But retreat review, I think it'd be good for us to have a review, and we talked about this a little bit, on how Robert brought it up, multiple people brought it up today, how we do a review of what we've already sent to the board to see if what's happened, if anything, and how we can then follow up on things, whether it's nuclear letter or it's the previous tracking the reach code alternative plans, all the things we've presented. So I'd love to have a discussion, just like what are the things, remind us what we've already done, and then what can we do to further that? And then related to that, if people in the group want to bring things up, how do they best do that? Or it isn't just at the 9 o'clock hour with 5 minutes left and we want to get out of here for future topics as well. Sorry, those are my two things.
Great, thank you.
All right.
That's great. Okay, so coming up at the next board meeting, well, the next board meeting is pretty much going to be strategic planning. It's going to be the board retreat. And you got an incredibly good overview of what the board is going to hear. So that's
And we're invited to that, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And I want to be clear that like the board meetings are public meetings. So you're always invited to all the public meetings.
Is it here?
Yeah,
It's always here, yeah.
it's
Okay.
here. And so
And you can
yes.
Zoom too. You could zoom in, you're not
Oh,
Brown
yeah.
active, you could participate as a public
Okay.
member as a Zoom person.
Yeah, so absolutely. CAC members are always welcome to the board. Anybody is always welcome to the board meetings online or here in person.
It's early though, it starts at 5:30, correct?
Yes.
An hour early, so Stephen can
Yes.
go, he's ready for 5:30.
Thank you for mentioning that. This one does start at 5:30. Usually it starts at 6:30, but they want a little more time for that very rich discussion.
Well, they have food at board meetings too.
They do have food, and that's actually what, so we can have food at the CAC meeting also. So if you'd like food, we can get it.
Not too soon, you have to come in person.
No, that's true.
You're used to provide some snacks.
Okay, then regular meeting. Yep, that's pretty much everything that's going on in October.
Did you guys have stuff from before, or things we had open month,
Right.
or anything that anybody wants to jump up, remember?
We do need to do our Brown Act training down the road, and we've also been kicking down the road a programs overview.
Yes.
Which we like to do for new members, but we've been kicking down the road. So it's kind of two big items we've been kicking down the road that I'd love to get to, just to orient all the new all the new members to to both those really important things.
I'm just thinking better application, so we talk exactly about these, incentives and how the EV incentives are using the. It'd be great, to get a really clear lowdown on that. And then it'll be great for PCE to communicate that to the public, but we'll.
Yes.
As a CAC member, I didn't even know what.
Mhm.
Yeah, got a heck, $3,000 for a pool. I thought I got a good deal with my incentive on the Spark, but the Volt is way better.
Gail, did you get a $3,000 Bolt?
Well, include federal tax credit.
Wow.
Oh.
And the PG, yeah.
So what is the federal tax credit?
It's includes
the new ones, yeah. Wow.
Oh,
Yeah.
based on income. It used to be not, I think,
Yeah.
but now it is, right?
But you raise an excellent point, Remy, that especially for the new members, we need to give you a rundown on the programs, and for existing members also, they always change, they're always, so it's.
We want to decarbonize low income people, bam, right there.
Exactly.
And it'll get all these bolts up, sitting off the lots and then you can shoot.
Absolutely, absolutely. Actually, I was just reading through like a draft marketing plan we have for doing more marketing on EV adoption. So we're going to be ramping that up.
But they do need a place to plug in.
Yes.
Do not fast charge very well compared to Teslas. So they're not a good like trip car, but they're good for around the area within a 200-mile range.
Right. Well, during the program review, we can also talk about our EV Ready program, which installs EV charging in apartment buildings. So lots to tell you about. Is there a hand over here?
Sure, yeah, I'll just say I've taken my Bolt on several road trips and it fast charges quite well. Secondly, I brought this up one other time, I'll just bring it up one more time, if there's energy around it, is looking at the bank that PCE uses. And considering maybe a change.
Because they fund fossil fuel.
I forgot you said.
Which bank is it?
I think it's JP Morgan Chase.
Yeah.
Boo. Stuff with our CFO.
Yeah.
And that's right. And we copied you on the
I think he
response.
mentioned it was challenging, but worthy of discussion.
Yes, yes.
I second the motion.
And this would fall under what I was talking about earlier about how do we do things? How do we activate things like that?
But it'd be better for PCE to use a community bank or what are those credit unions or something that's local so that it's not going to New York.
Used to be invested in First Republic Bank. It was a nice bank that delivered them. And then, of course, they went under and so.
Because they stopped being local and they did some stuff like WW stuff inside the area. Real estate.
Bringing it up. And we'll keep seconding it.
Yes. Anybody else have anything?
It's a simple slam dunk value. We should be enforcing.
Anybody online have any future topic things or public people? Okay. Okay, then we have committee members reports. Does anyone have a committee member report? Oh, we're gonna be done early. Jason. Or
How the hell are we gonna be doing early?
we're ahead of the timing of the agenda. 5 minutes. Any members of the public on our non-existing committee members?
We have different definitions of early.
Confused, didn't we just call the subcommittee reports earlier or?
Working. This is a. I don't know.
An individual, it's an individual.
Individual. Say I'm gonna be doing this talk or whatever.
The time for committee members can report out on something related to the.
Or conversation to do or something like that.
Oh, okay.
Rarely use it.
That's like the council report and the city council. Okay.
Any public comment on the non-reports? Okay. Excellent, then I think we have a plan, right?
Yeah.
All right, thank you, we don't need to, we just adjourn, right?
We can just adjourn.
We are adjourned.
Thank you.
Good night, everybody.
Early.
Good night.
Good job.
Early. Holy